compensation standpoint, but then they end up saying that their buyers will not sign the agreement, so they're canceling.
Okay. Well, that's a little bit different if that means that that agent is having issues basically signing up that buyer, which would answer my second question, which is, are we getting pushback on that? I think the market, Jordan Levine, who some of you may know, uh, he's the CAR analyst that crunches all the numbers. I was on a call with him just recently that he's basically anticipating, because the interest rates have come down and the interest rates are going to, in his opinion, not go a whole lot lower over the next year to 2 years, that we may see a higher demand in the what have traditionally been the more quiet months, right? Heading into the holidays and everything else. So it'll be interesting to see if that kind of comes to play, because I think, there's a lot of buyers out there that the interest rates are coming down to a point where, we may get some more activity. I mean, his guess is better than mine because he's the economist. And I know that he's speaking at the CAR convention in Long Beach. I think it's Thursday. So, I don't know if we're gonna everybody's crystal ball, is as good as anybody else's. But I think the not signing thing actually brings me to an issue for you guys that I did want to bring up while we're here. One of the things from a down on the ground that we are seeing, and CAR's gotten wind of it. I've seen it with multiple clients throughout California to my own clients. There are buyers out there. They're called testers. And basically, what they are attorneys or professional who want to be professional plaintiffs that are going out and they're testing to see if there's compliance with the NAR settlement. And so, what they've been doing is they've been reaching out to agents both by text, by email. Sometimes they'll even call them, but for the most part, they like to try and get a written something right. But basically, what they're doing is they're saying, "Hi, I want to tour this property." So back to what Kimberly was saying, I want to tour this property, but I'm not going to sign anything. Essentially trying to bait the agent to showing them a property without having something in writing, which is a clear violation of the NAR settlement. And the CAR has gotten wind of it so that they're making the brokers aware of it. And then I'm making you guys aware of it. But it's the folks are out there. They're just trying to find some more people to sue. And to me, when I've said that to some of my other clients, I've already had some of my agents say, I got one of those. So be aware, because I think that's probably the most dangerous thing right now with the settlement being implemented are these testers out there. Candidly, even though we're being recorded, this is in-house. They're bottom feeders and they're looking for a quick buck. We've seen this over the cycles that I've been involved in, which has been quite a few. They'll surface. The latest one from a few years ago was the ADA compliance. Attorneys had professional plaintiffs, and they were sending out letters to everybody in the kitchen sink saying, "Hi, you violated the ADA. Pay us a few $1,000s right now. We're going to sue you. And by the way, if we sue you, it's going to cost you $50,000 to defend it." And so people were paying essentially legalized extortion, barely legal, but legalized extortion. So I suspect that's what we're going to start seeing again, which makes you guys targets. See, the NAR settlement, they're going after the big kids, the franchisors and everything else. This kind of activity is actually targeting agents. And our E&O is not going to cover this stuff. If you violate the NAR, you're violating certain laws. Our E&O doesn't cover it. So you're talking out of pocket stuff here. So be aware. I think from an NAR settlement status standpoint, to me, that's probably the one thing that is out there right now that I think is in danger to all of you, on a right out of the gate standpoint.
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense to everybody.
And their car does have a Q&A on, it's called open houses in a post-NAR settlement world. And if you will email me, I will send you the Q&A and a quick guide. But basically what it says on question 7 is if you have a visitor that refuses to sign, then they can still tour the home, of course. We don't tell them, you know, to turn around and leave. We can only share the information that's on the flyer that that's
Mhm.
provided, and that is it. No more. As soon as you go further than that, then you start stepping over the boundaries. So whatever's on the flyer, and then what you make clear to them is that you do represent the seller at that point, because they are refusing to sign and they are not working with you. So I will send this to you. So um, let me see here. I'm looking for a particular line. Uh,
Yeah, just to be clear, everybody, I know we've talked about this before, but just for the open houses, you're not police. It's not your job. You don't have to,
Mhm.
please don't say, I demand to see the BRBC of the buyer's broker. That just don't do that. There are some agents out there, the listing agents that have been doing that. And, you know, the word all the way from CAR folks down to me is please don't do that. There's no reason for you to do that. You let them tour the house. You don't say anything to them. You turn off your broker hat. If they don't sign something, you don't talk to them. You say, hi, here's the flyer. And then if they want to talk to you, that's where the sales side comes in that you guys deal with, which is, okay, well, if you want me to talk to you, you have to sign something.
Yeah,
Okay. So
exactly.
so
So,
that's the hard part for agents to remember. You can't open your mouth in that scenario about the house, you
yeah,
know, and it just that's the safest thing to do. And again, as I said, because these testers are out there, we don't know who they are. We haven't seen anything yet. I'm waiting to see the format of whatever claims they're going to make and who the attorneys are that are going to start doing this, because I suspect someone in my world will see that and it'll percolate up to CAR, and then CAR will share that with, you know, anybody that'll listen, basically. But you know, you just have to be careful about that, and you're easy pickings if something like that, especially
yeah,
if they come in with a couple of people, because the testers, they need evidence. The best evidence is you responding to an email. Sure, I'll tour the property with you and won't make you sign anything, which is a clear violation of the NAR settlement. Will they show up with a witness to say, oh yeah, we went through and we asked them questions about what the seller is willing to do for concessions, and we asked them all kinds of stuff and they answered every single question. So, you know, don't fall for it.
yeah. So basically what it says here on the Q&A is if the visitor asks for information beyond what is contained in the information sheet listing flyer, the open house agent should tell the visitor they cannot provide such information unless the visitor is willing to sign in. So that's it, kind of in a nutshell on this CAR form. So if you want this, email me, don't text me, email me, and I will reply back with the CAR Q&A for you. So
So,
very, very, very important. And I know it's so counterintuitive to all of us because we're in the service business, and we want to give them information. We want to share all of that, but we can't do it. So be
so
very, very guarded. So
when
thank
they
you, Andy, for bringing up the testers.
so when they come in, what is it that we have them sign?
There's an
There's a
open
new form for
house.
that.
Yeah, there's a form. So you have the open house visitor non-agency, they can sign that. They have a property visit and open house advisory that you can sign. There's actually 4 different forms and it addresses it on this Q&A. You have the open house visitor non-agency, you have the buyer non-agency, you have the buyer rep agreement, and you have the property showing and representation agreement. So
So I need
So
to
the
get them to
first,
sign one or all of those.
so the first
it,
agreement, Diane, is the one you want to use because
the
Linda, the
open house,
last part of that title says and sign in.
yeah,
Okay.
So that's the sign in. That's the non-agency that most buyers are used to signing something, you know, like a sign-in sheet. CAR specifically named it sign in, and they made it extremely short. So the first paragraph just says, I'm not representing the buyer, I represent the seller. And if the potential visitor signs that, because it's easy, it's short, it's not intimidating, gives you the listing agent. I've been calling it the key to open your mouth at the showing. And now you can talk because there's a clear confirmation that you are not in any way representing that person touring. So the sign-in agreement is the one you want to use for just people walking off the, off the street. Obviously, if you're there and you're trying to, of course, reel in a buyer, you can talk to them about the property, and that gives you carte blanche to do that. But the minute they start asking you about, well, what about, could you show me other properties? Or what about something else? Then you have to move on to one of the other agreements.
Okay, what about in my situation where, let's say somebody calls me and wants to see one of my properties? Am I allowed to talk to them about the property and tell them about the property on the phone?
Well, who's the someone? Just somebody
A
calling
buyer,
a
let's
cold
say
call?
they found my number on Zillow or something like that, and they want to know about the property if they call me about the property.
So the NAR settlement says you shall have something in writing before you tour the property.
But what about
Okay.
if they're just
You're
asking
not,
questions about the property?
that doesn't seem to be touring the property.
Okay.
Okay. So, the issue really is there has been inconsistent advice from NAR and CAR. They've actually had a few things that they kind of disagree on. Okay. So best practices is, if somebody wants to call and talk to you, it's just like sending out an email. You're sending out your emails. Talking to them technically doesn't violate the NAR settlement. NAR's position really is the minute you specify and you start focusing on any particular property, that you should have a written agreement. What NAR is saying is that's the spirit of the settlement, and I use the air quotes because settlement agreement does not say that. But NAR's kind of taken the position that, if the minute you focus on a property, a single property with a buyer, you should have something in writing with them. And I can tell you the reason they're doing that, candidly, they got lawsuits coming out their ears. And just because this NAR settlement is hitting, remember everybody, there's still litigation all over the place. Okay. And if you Inman, Real Estate News, whatever you get your news from, there's all kinds of other lawsuits floating around out there. So NAR is taking an extremely conservative approach because they are trying to limit their litigation. They're trying to narrow down and possibly get rid of as many of these potential lawsuits out there as they possibly can. So they're taking a very conservative approach. My long answer to your question, Diane, is telling them what's publicly available on your flyer is no harm, no foul. However, if the minute they started asking you, what's your seller? If they start asking you specifically about, geez, your seller, willing to do X or Y, or, what's, have you permit, whatever. If they ask you stuff that's outside of that flyer, you should be treating it like, they're at an open house and they're not your client. You hand them the flyer, feel free to talk to them anything about the flyer, but don't go past that. I think
So,
if you stay consistent with that, I think you're in good shape. And so even if one of these people are a tester, you're still only giving them publicly available information. Do not discuss what your seller's contemplating. And certainly if they're talking about representation for you, the minute they say that they're interested in representation, you should just cut to the chase and get them to sign, either the short form buyer broker agreement or the full blown BRBC.
so I get those calls constantly. I mean, I get I get that kind of stuff all the time. So
Sure.
there's
Diane,
all
I
these
would
people that are
just-
investors that are trying to say, they're trying to do creative financing type stuff where, the property is, let's say 300,000, they want to buy it for 200,000, or they want to buy it for 300,000, but they want the seller to do seller financing and all that kind of creative financing type stuff.
No.
I mean, my guy won't do it anyway, but my typical response is, I'm sorry, your offer is too low, or I'm sorry, the seller doesn't do that kind of thing.
I think you have a problem because right now, what you just said, your offer is too low. That if you consider that you're negotiating, you have to have the minute there's a negotiation where you're negotiating the sale of the property, The NAR settlement really is about who's representing who and when. And the minute you start really talking about a specific property and creative financing, especially, now you've gone past that. And I think, at that point in time, really what you should be doing is say, you know what, submit your offer.
Yeah, but I
I'll
want
show it
you
to
to
my
write the offer,
investors.
yeah, I mean, I guess I could just
Well, but
say,
see,
I have to write the offer.
the minute they say that, they want you to be their agent. Now you've got to have something in writing. See what I'm
Okay.
saying? They're trying to goat you into doing it because you're the listing agent. But the
Right.
point is, you're already having a specific conversation with them. And if I'm that buyer, even though, let's say I'm a tester, I'm that buyer. I walked in and I asked you kind of tactical strategy questions about your seller and what they'd be willing to take. We're in negotiations. And I thought that agent was representing me.
I get these daily.
I know you do.
Well,
So
Diane,
unfortunately,
yeah,
go
yeah,
ahead.
you send them a flyer, period. And if they continue to ask questions, just say, I'm unable to answer these questions. I represent the seller. Unless you want me to be your agent, I will send over. You can send them the property showing agreement, which is the baby, buyer rep agreement, if it's on a specific property, and say, if when you sign this, I am then free to have this conversation with you. Until then, here's the flyer, period. You've got to cut it. You've got to cut it right now. Because if you don't, these testers will have all of us in court.
Yeah.
And as hard as it is for us, and like I said earlier, counterintuitive to what we do, you have to do it.
Yeah.
It's a pain. And I'm sorry to be
Yeah, I get these daily. So I'm gonna have to sign contracts with people daily just to tell them they're not interested. I'm not interested.
Well,
yeah. I mean, that's probably the reality of it.
Yeah, you send them the flyer and let them decide if they want to create agency with you. And
I don't even have a flyer on every one of these properties.
Well, then you send them the MLS client printout.
Yeah, sadly,
A nightmare.
as you guys have heard me say before, the NAR settlement from a legal standpoint hasn't really changed a lot of the legal landscape, candidly, from where I sit as a lawyer. From a practice standpoint, do you have to jump through all kinds of hoops before you can have the kind of conversation Diane really wants to have with these folks? Yes. And so that's the practice issue, which is why, everybody's got their own business. Everybody does their own business their own way, which means, one size doesn't really fit all. That's why the best advice we can give is these kind of lines that we're trying to draw to say, hey, don't cross that line. And so whatever part of your practice crosses that line,
so I'm not even
you're going to
allowed
have
to
to modify it.
say the seller's not interested in any creative financing. I'm not even allowed to say that.
Diane, you get all that kind of stuff. My question would be, why are you even having the conversation right out of the gate where they're telling you enough where you can say my seller's not interested in
Because they
creative
send me
financing?
emails. I get multiple emails a day. I got one today.
Wonderful. Respond like Linda just said. Send an email back with the information to them and say, if you want to talk about, a transaction, I need you to sign something. And here's a buyer non-agency. Send them the BNA that says, I'm not representing you. And then you can talk to them. But you got to get something in writing, because the minute you're negotiating on a property, I think you're in violation of any of our settlement when negotiations start. And I don't want to find out. I don't want you to be the test case.
So I can't even say he's not willing to do creative finance.
You're trying, Diane. I mean, you're trying. I wish I could give you a different answer.
Wow. What a pain. This is going to be a tremendous amount of work for nothing.
Well,
I have to tell all these guys to go pound sand.
Flyer, and if they want to establish agency, then you take it to the next step. You send them the flyer and let them, figure it out. They will also figure it out as they go through this process. Because if they're realtors themselves, they know about this lawsuit. So
yeah, but I get these calls, a lot of them from investors, like the creative financing thing,
Send them the flyer.
A similar thing happened to me on Sunday. I was showing a property, one of my newest listings, and someone called and said, can I show my clients? I said, sure, we're closing it up, but if you can make it in 5 minutes, please do so. She came with her clients. At the end, I let them view the property on their own. And I stood in front of the ring purposely when they came out to discuss. And she said, we're not represented. I'm like, excuse me? She said, we're not represented. Will your client take this? Will your client take that? All I can say is submit. You need to submit an offer
So,
and I'll present it to my
so
clients.
they just flat out lied to you. You thought one of them
They,
was a realtor when they walked in?
they, yes, flat out lied to me. Exactly.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah. And so I told her to submit, and on her way out, well, we want to make an offer. We want to make an offer, submit. Will they take this? Will they take that? I said, unfortunately, you would have to submit your offer. And she said she would. But yeah, she tried to negotiate terms outside of any type of agreement. So what I did, before leaving, I just sent her the video of what I took of the property because I didn't have a flower in hand, and haven't heard from her since.
Yeah. Well, if I were, sadly, to me, that sounds like a tester.
Yes, it
Um,
sounds like it is.
candidly. Having said that, though, you guys all run your own businesses, but when you've got somebody that you just met, you don't know from Adam, and they just lied to you to get into the property, my reaction probably wouldn't have been so professional as yours. Good for you. Congratulations. You handled it very well. But, I'd be very skeptical of dealing with them or even having a remote conversation with them for that reason. Good job.
It's all on camera.
Yeah, nice.
Good job, Estella. All right, anybody else? Questions while you're out there, writing your buyer rep agreement?
Yes, I have one.
Okay.
I signed up a client with a builder in December of last year. House is not going to be built until, or not ready for occupancy until December of this year. Do I have to get a buyer representation agreement for that? I've not shown the property. Property doesn't even exist at this point.
Well, I mean, it's new construction, so you've already signed up with the builder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're going to get
Pre-settlement.
you're going to get your referral fee. Anything that was done like that pre-settlement
Mhm.
is good. I mean, that's between you and the builder, actually. Now,
Okay.
if that buyer all of a sudden pops up and says, "Hey, Ernst, show me some more properties," now you got a new deal. You have to deal with the
I
buyer
get
rep.
that,
But
yeah.
yeah,
But for that one, it
yeah.
does.
But the fact that you did that before settlement and it's with a builder, I'm more concerned with the builders, not cooperating with you guys more than anything else. So the fact that you've got signed in, the one thing I would check though, make sure there's no requirement for you to re-sign or them to re-sign to renew this.
There isn't.
I saw that happen with a developer 6 months ago where they had some small print
Mhm.
in their sign in that says, "Oh, you have to basically renew this,
Yep.
or we won't pay the broker." So just I say that because I did see it happen.
Okay.
All right.
Andy, I have a question, just to make sure. The BRBC, we have this thing, best practice and really what's required as of today. The BRBC, an agent texts and wants to come and see the property. And I asked, I'm asking, do you have a BRBC? They say, yes, I do. Should I require them to actually email me that last page?
No. Don't.
Do
You
that.
do not need to be the police for your open houses, for showing, or anything else. You're entitled to rely on an agent. An agent could just say, "Hi, my buyer wants to see the property." Cool. Let's set it up. You have no obligation to say, "Well, did you get an agreement with your buyer?" That's not what we do. We don't have to do any of that. The only time you're going to care about the last page of the BRBC is if you get a deal and your seller wants confirmation that there's actually an agreement, and then you'll get them to send that to escrow.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
What about leasing? I'm having a lease coming up. Are these practices apply to the lease if I have to show a lease?
So here's the long, short answer to that, Daniela. The settlement does not apply to commercial properties or landlord tenant. However, because the compensation field has been removed from the MLS, there's no way to communicate the offer of compensation in commercial transactions or in landlord tenant, unless you're using, LoopNet or one of those. And I don't believe they've changed their practices because they're commercial. So there is an impact on that. What CAR has done is they have actually they've revised a couple of the landlord tenant forms to give so that there's the ability to get compensation. I'm just kind of looking as I'm talking to you right now. There it is.
A tenant representation agreement now.
So yeah, just because we're here, just for fun, let's see here. Linda, let me share.
Okay.
What if the agent said, "Oh, I want you to represent him because I'm not getting anything." You know how the lease is.
Yeah, they're trying to across the board, even for their commercial documents, because CAR has removed all references to shared compensation in all of their forms, both commercial and otherwise. So that's why I said it's kind of a long answer to your question. No, the NAR settlement doesn't directly apply. However, it's having an impact because they've taken all of that out. So for example, this is the landlord tenant form Linda was just referring to. It's actually in the lease, okay, the RLMM. And this is actually not out there yet, you guys. This is brand new forms I just got from CAR because of the forms release for December. So these are still in the revision stage. You guys know, usually I get a little bit of an advance on some of the forms that are being potentially revised. I just got them literally this morning. So this is what they're doing. But you can see here, paragraph 42, they've got the broker compensation and the existing written agreement. So they're working through this process for the landlord tenant so that we can make sure that, as you see here, 42A1, tenant compensation to tenant's broker, owner compensation. They're putting similar language into a couple of the documents for landlord tenant to try and deal with that. So short version is, as on the landlord tenant side, yeah, we're going to have to communicate just like you would if it was a real deal, a regular residential deal. You're going to have to communicate, hey, who's paying who, and you're going to have to do it early on.
Yeah, but the other agents usually say, "Oh, I want you to do all the paperwork. I don't want to represent," because that's how usually the leases go. The leasing agent, is doing all the work.
Well, and understand, nothing's changed, so you can still do all of that. We just want to make sure who's paying who. So that's what CAR is trying to revise these documents for. So again, for your practice, non-residential 1 to 4, nothing has changed. There's no requirement for you to do anything different, at least as of right now. Nothing's changed there because it doesn't apply.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, what
Anybody else out there having?
I have a quick question, please.
Hey, Lori.
Okay, so I'm in the process, literally right now, of looking for a small commercial lease property for my client moving from Chicago. So just to review what you just spoke of, I do not have to have my client sign anything at this point. I can just speak to the corporation, the property manager, the landlord.
Nothing has changed there.
Okay.
The issue is you've got to make sure if the landlord is going to compensate you, you need to get that taken care of up front. That's the difference. Okay. But no, it's your practice doesn't change. It just doesn't change. But you have to now pay attention to who's paying you. So from that standpoint, you'll have to make sure.
Okay, so since that's not published anymore, am I allowed to ask over the phone what compensation is
absolutely.
to? Oh, okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You can do that on our regular residential transactions too. Even if the listing agent is willing to talk to you, best practice is the listing agent is not going to talk to you. They shouldn't, and you guys shouldn't. You should say, submit your offer in writing and we'll look at it.
Okay,
Don't give any heads up because there's an argument that you're actually potentially giving away some of your seller secrets, if you will. So yeah, call and ask and then confirm it in writing.
okay. In your opinion, Andy, is it better for me to prepare the commercial lease agreement for my client tenant, or leave it up, or is it basically at the discretion of the landlord?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question. I'm a landlord. Would I want my tenant preparing a lease for me? I might have a problem with that. Okay. Candidly, if you're a commercial tenant, you give them a letter of intent, an LOI, and say, here's the terms I want. Are you willing to go for it? And then the landlord generally will have their own custom attorney generated lease. If you're going to use just a CAR lease, then use a CAR lease. That's what it's there for. And certainly if the landlord is willing to accept a CAR commercial lease that was prepared by the buyer, because it's a relatively neutral form from that standpoint. That's their business decision. There's no prohibition. It's just, it seems unusual to me.
It makes more sense that they would prepare it from there. And this is the first time I've stepped into this arena. So thank you very much for that.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. Yeah. You can submit anything you want for your buyer. But if it's really commercial, a lot of those folks, the commercial brokers a lot of them aren't members of CAR. They don't have access to the forms. They use different forms. They use the air forms. I mean, there's all kinds of other stuff out there for the commercial landlords. But if one of them's willing to accept a CAR lease, a commercial lease, okay, that's what they're there for.
Thank you.
Sure.
So as you've gone out and you're starting to work with buyers and you explain to them post-settlement world, what are the buyers saying about the buyer rep agreement or the property showing agreement? Are you getting resistance? Do they understand? How are the buyers receiving it?
I've had 2 buyers recently, and just yesterday, it's a multi-tiered transaction. I was telling Linda yesterday, but this particular family, all professionals, they hadn't even heard of the NAR settlement. So I gave them the Reader's Digest version, and it went very smoothly. They had no problem signing it. And they even said, if it's a matter of your compensation, Lori, we'd rather not pay for it as buyers. However, if it's a great property and we want it, we're willing to negotiate with you if the offer is rejected, or, so they were open. They were very open.
So did you get the buyer rep agreement signed?
I sure did.
And what did you put in there for your compensation?
2.5%.
Good girl. Good job.
Yeah.
Good job. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think
the buyer
a lot of buyers.
I haven't had any issues. I've had mine signed as well.
Good. And people they're understanding.
One had seen, a few things on TV. They also they do buy and sell frequently. So they've even received some of those postcards. Have you recently bought? Or so they kind of were aware of all the stuff coming. And then another one hadn't heard, but explained it. They wanted to see it before signing. They understood and they said, well, I've bought and sold, like who wouldn't want to pay? But I guess when we submit our offer, we'll find out. And if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. But I didn't have any problems with anyone signing so far.
Good.
Unfortunately, the people wanting to show my listing, they're having problems. Maybe I need to guide them.
There you go. Well, great agent to do that, Kimberly.
Yeah, I think a big portion
Thank
of it
you.
is, again, giving the Reader's Digest version of the NAR settlement to, a new buyer that hasn't heard about it yet, because a lot of people have. If you give them the nutshell version, that every open house they go to, for example, they're going to have the same conversation generally, or they're going to see the same documents or the request for signatures. People are going to get used to it. And that's kind of what we anticipated, but just like everything else, we didn't know how it was gonna play out until we had it real time, which we have had it real time now for almost a month and a week or so. And I'm pleasantly surprised that I haven't heard more horror stories. There are horror stories, but they are not the majority. They seem to be a small minority, which is wonderful for you guys.
Anybody else with the buyer rep? Okay, let's flip it over. How's the conversation going with your sellers when you explain the new world?
They think the world is crazy. Who would do that? But they're also, I just met with one of my sellers face to face yesterday. They're asking, where are all the buyers?
They're there. They're just have the brakes on right now.
Yeah, no, and like I said at the beginning of the meeting, I've seen that in multiple locations throughout California, and as I said, the economist for CAR has also made mention of that. It seems like there was a reset for like a 30-day kind of everybody. It slowed down a little bit, and then it's picking up again. Uh, we'll see. I mean, it's great for us to all get our crystal balls out, but the reality is we won't know. But we've had that. We've had it in the past before the NAR settlement. You have times where all of a sudden it's like the spigot turns off, and then all of a sudden it turns back on. And I don't know if it's everybody starting school, for example. I don't know. I'm not an economist, and I think they are just giving an educated guess anyway.
Well, we talked about it yesterday in the class, and there in several industries we've all noticed, talked about. I've had people say that their business has just slowed way down, and it isn't related to real estate at all. So it seems to be pretty much across the board where people have pulled back. So whether it's the election, whether it's back to school, whatever it might be, it seems to be more of a broad scope than just real estate related. Um, just real estate related. So
And some of the buyers, it's also with all the recent fires that have been around us too.
yeah. So we have a question. The testers you have spoken of, are they being sent by DRE or SRCAR? No, they're bottom feeders out there, lawyers, attorneys trying to find a lawsuit.
Yeah, they're not NAR, CAR checking up on their members. Sorry, just to be clear, it's the folks that are trying to make some more money. So yeah, it's for your purposes, it's the bad guys. Okay. You want nothing to do with them.
All right, anybody else working with a seller and having the conversation? Any input you'd like to share? How many of you oh, go ahead.
Is that me, Daniela?
Yes, go ahead.
I have a listing coming up, and somebody asked the same question. What if a person, a non-agent, asking me, I want to see this property. I don't have an agent, but I want to see this property. How would I go by?
Then if you're going to show the property, then what I would do is I would either do the, because it's not the open house. I would do if they want you to represent them, you have to establish agency. So you can either do the property showing agreement, or you can do the buyer rep agreement. And I would explain that you do represent the seller, and for you to show the property, that maybe isn't an open house, that you would need one of those agreements signed if they want you to represent them. Now, Andy, if you get a call like that and you just open the door and let a client in there and hand them a flyer and don't take it any further, what's your
Okay,
take on that?
Yeah, that was because they said, well, we don't know if we like the property, but we want to see it first.
Of
Just
course, it
meet
doesn't
with
matter. I
them,
mean, yeah.
just meet with them and give them a property flyer.
Well, let me ask Andy that question. If it's merely to open the door, let them walk the house, hand them a flyer, what is your take on that?
I think if you're going to have them open the door, if you're going to open the door for them, you, at a minimum, even though that sign-in agreement's really for, open house, I would treat it as an open house, have them sign the sign-in agreement.
Okay,
It makes me nervous when somebody does that, because here's the thing. It's not so much them, it's my agent realtor. So it'd be you. You open the door and they ask you a question. Okay. And now what do? Your general response would be to talk. And that's what you can't do. And so it's almost like having an unlicensed assistant. You have an unlicensed assistant, they can't talk about anything having to do with real estate transaction. So I think the best practice to be safe, have them sign the sign-in agreement. Okay,
Yeah,
or the
may
buyer
I-
non-agency. But
may I
sure.
May I say, well, sure, I will meet you at the property, but before entering the house, I would like you to sign a property showing agreement.
My suggestion to you is don't show up at the house with it. Email it to them right now.
yeah, before.
Because if they get there and they have some reason why they don't want to sign it, what are you going to do?
Okay.
So if you don't want to do the property showing, I like Andy's suggestion of doing the open house visitor, non-agency, and using that form. So,
You could use that, or the buyer non-agency, the BNA. I mean, the whole
the
point is
problem-
to make it very clear that you're not their agent, you're not acting as an agent, you're acting only for the seller. But I would do it, my suggestion to you would be you email it to them ahead of time so that they can
Yeah.
either sign it right then, or if they say, well, we'll sign it there, fine, bring it printed out, have them sign it. But you take the risk of them saying, oh, this is too long, I'm not going to sign it without reading it. And then you just say, okay, well, go ahead and read it and let me know, and I'll open the door after you're done reading it, you sign it. And you get into that kind of thing. Can you do that? Sure. Is it advisable because of the potential hiccups that you could have?
yeah, it's
Maybe a
best
different
to
answer.
email it over prior. And if they're not willing to sign that when you send it over, there's your red flag. Don't go down, don't do it.
Okay.
So once you email them something like that,
Okay.
then, and they sign it, then you can talk to them about anything? If they ask
Well, it
questions?
depends on which it depends on which
Yeah.
document you sign.
Well, like
If
the
it's a
buyer
buyer-
non-agent, or BNA, or the open house non-agency, not that one, would be the BNA is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, the BNA is more properly used in a transaction where it's an unrepresented party. Okay, where you're actually in a transaction. I'm just giving you guys the option and the ability to have something. The main thing for the NAR settlement purposes is to confirm you are not their agent in writing before they tour a house. That's the bottom line. So whatever we can do, whatever we need to do to accomplish that, even if we're kind of fitting a document that maybe isn't specifically for that purpose, we can use it. If you use a buyer non-agency, that really just says, hey, we're in a transaction. I'm going to be using SRCAR forms, but I'm not representing you. I'm only representing the seller. So does that accomplish what we needed to accomplish before you show them the property? Yeah. You're not representing them. They're confirming that. Then you can yak away.
And honestly, I wouldn't use the buyer non-agency. If they're wanting to see a property, like they're calling you, I would at least do the property showing agreement. I wouldn't be comfortable with the buyer non-agency, because how far can you go answering questions? Again, do you just give them the flyer because you represent the seller? Just err on the side of caution, do the property showing agreement at a minimum. And then now you have established yourself as their agent for that one house.
Yeah.
And you
do want to
can
get
have
paid,
the
right? Because the other
conversation.
two documents, you're not getting paid. You
Yeah,
don't have an agreement. So you're showing the property as a freebie. And, I know that's historically what a lot of agents would do, but, remember, I'm the lawyer. You guys do the sales stuff. It seems to me you want a written agreement that you're getting paid if this blossoms versus you opening that door, showing them the property with a buyer non-agency or the sign-in. I do, by the way, I do agree with Linda. The sign-in sheet's going to be better for that scenario. I'm just saying you could use the other one. And then they show up with their brother-in-law writing the offer. Okay, yeah. Why? It seems to me you'd want to have something that says, hey, if this property you like it, you're going to pay me.
So why would you want to use a BNA? When?
Well,
In what
Well,
scenario?
there's the BNA, as I said, is more properly used in an unrepresented buyer circumstance where there's an RPA where you're actually going to be in a transaction with an unrepresented party. That's
Oh,
where the
okay.
BNA
Yeah.
is required under the RPA.
Okay.
So now also what we're seeing on the unrepresented buyer on the residential listing agreement, we're seeing where agents are putting, I'm seeing as high as 2.5% there. And if you have a buyer that's unrepresented, now, of course, you're doing all the work, but you're doing it at 2.5%. Whereas before, we would typically see 1%. So a lot of our agents have given themselves a raise by doing it that way.
I think that's great for the industry because, there's a lot of concern at the broker level about agents coming in and selling themselves short, which of course affects everybody. Oh, well, my agent's charging $500 for me to be my buyer's agent, that kind of stuff. Haven't seen it. I'm sure maybe it's happening somewhere, but the markets that I'm involved in, I haven't heard anybody doing that. And like I said, I'm sure they're out there, but I haven't seen it affect any of my deals with any of my brokers.
Okay.
Remember the purpose of the buyer non-agency. If you do have the unrepresented buyer in a transaction where you represent the seller, that form is rare, just as it's rare that we use the seller non-agency. But we do have FSBOs once in a while. So that is just to let everybody know, if you sign a buyer non-agency, that you represent the seller. Any information that that buyer does share with you, you will tell the seller.
Yep.
So again, that form is rarely used. I don't believe in what we're talking about here of showing homes that I would never in a million years use the BNA.
Right.
I wouldn't.
Makes
I would
sense.
Well, for the
at a
showing,
minimum,
it doesn't make sense. As I
yeah,
said,
property
the
showing.
BNA,
That's it.
the only place I would suspect that we will see it is in the same context as the seller non-agency, the SNA form, which is SNA is a FSBO. BNA is going to be where you have an unrepresented buyer, just 180 degrees the other thing, right? It's just a flip. That's what it's for. CAR is there's been all kinds of confusion about unrepresented buyers, and CAR actually percolated up to them, and CAR apparently is having all of their local folks investigate to give them numbers on whether or not the unrepresented buyer is really a big deal, or if it's really not. It's kind of like a FSBO. FSBOs are not that big, in terms of volume. And they're trying to see if it's a bigger problem than it needs to be, because there's been a lot of confusion about the unrepresented buyer, angle, if you will, throughout the state.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have a situation that I ran into. I signed a buyer broker agreement with a potential client and showed them one property, and followed up the next day and was told that they no longer want to be represented by me, as they've now signed a Zillow touring agreement. And I said, bye-bye. But
Well,
they're
did you
out
have a
there.
BRBC? Did you have a BRBC with them, or just
Yes, I do.
for just that property? Or
No,
for
no.
Hmm.
Blanket.
okay. Just so we're clear, everybody, that's great that you've decided you'd walk away from, but under the VRBC, you have an agreement with them and you can force the issue. Of course, a lot of agents aren't going to do that, but the reality is, hey, I have a BRBC with you, and they can't fire you if it's an exclusive agreement.
Right.
They can't fire you. Okay. Just like on a listing, the seller just can't fire you and say, "Oh, I don't like you anymore. Bye. I'm gonna relist it with another agent." Now, the fact that you made a business decision and say, "See ya, have a good day," that's your business decision. But everybody, just remember, you got an agreement. It's enforceable unless you agree that it's not.
Right.
Yeah, so your buyer rep agreement is good for 90 days. That's the maximum you can go. For cancellation, if you're exclusive, is a minimum of 30 days. If you do the non-exclusive, it could be right away.
Whatever.
So
Yeah.
I would remind them, it just depends on, again, like Andy said, it's your business decision, how hard you want to push this with them. And if they do end up, did you show them a house?
Yeah.
Did they like the house?
No, it wasn't for them. It didn't fit.
Oh,
So I just decided, you know what? People like that, I'm not interested in working with. So
How can Zillow get away with like just, I mean, don't buyers have to sign anything with them
oh,
to,
you should look up that agreement. It's something else. It's all over the internet.
will you send it
It
to
is all over the internet.
Ernie? Oh, Ernie, will you send it to me?
Sure, we'll do.
Thank you.
Oh, well, yeah, I've got it too. I've got clients that actually have made it available. So it's the Zillow touring agreement is one of the things that is some brokers are using. It's the work for free agreement.
Yeah.
It says, "Hi, I'm going to show you properties for free." And if you can't get a BRBC or the mini BRBC, as I call it, that's what Zillow is throwing out there so that you can show them properties, but you're working for free. The problem with the document is, any custom documents that are floating around out there are now not in safe haven with the CAR forms. They're not supported by CAR. The validity of them, we'll see. I mean, to my knowledge, CAR has not come up with any kind of touring agreement, and they don't intend to. The new forms that I've got right now that I got this morning, I didn't see anything in there that even remotely looks like that. But it's out there, but you're working for free. And the agent that is signing that up, they're working for free, showing properties, which means that same buyer can do exactly what they just did to you, which is, "Okay, cool, thanks, see ya."
Yeah.
Or turn around and go right to the listing agent and say, "Hi, I'm an unrepresented buyer and I want you to represent me." So, there are agents that are willing to do that. But as I said, you basically, if they walk away from you and then they immediately go to the listing agent, not, shame on you for letting them sign the agreement.
Right.
But it is out there.
but we have like, we have scouts out there that are looking to see if we have them sign something. How could they get away with it, showing properties without having them sign anything? Zillow.
Well, no, they are. No, that's what the touring agreement is. It's just a little teeny mini showing agreement, but there's no compensation. So
Kind of like how we used to show homes. I mean, we used to.
Well, it's like the old days. You would,
same way.
but you always expected to get paid. You just didn't have to do the documentation up front. You just did it later, and you had compensation, so you knew you were going to get paid from this listing side. So you didn't have to pay attention to it. Well, now we have to pay attention to it. But the touring agreement complies with the NAR settlement because you're getting something in writing confirming the agency prior to touring the property. So that's what Zillow has come up with. But that agreement has no compensation. And like I just said, if the buyer says, "Okay, cool, thanks for showing it to me, and I'm going to have my brother make the offer," you're out.
That's how they're slowly going to take our business away from us, because there's a lot of buyers that won't want to sign. Some will, some won't. It just doesn't seem right, but whatever.
I think you sound overly pessimistic. I don't think
Zillow's
been trying to take over your world. Zillow's
But even
been trying
more
to take
so
over
now.
everything.
Yeah.
I know, but they've been trying to take over Redfin and Zillow and those. They've all been trying to take over, and everybody's, for years I've been listening to this. "Oh, they're coming to tell you, I'm going to be out of the job." It hadn't happened yet, and some of the companies that have tried that, they're not in business anymore. So, I'm not seeing the numbers that would justify being quite that pessimistic.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Andy, have you seen what's one of the main plaintiffs in this case that apparently a couple weeks ago started up a company for showings and then X amount of dollars they'll write offers.
Yeah, he has a à la carte menu brokerage. So he started his
Yeah.
own brokerage now.
Yes.
Yeah, that's just somebody else's new business model. And they, by the way, it's not new. We've had shoot, which one is it? Not Redfin. They've had their business model is everything's a la carte. And can you do it? Yeah. Can you use CAR forms to do it? Not really, because they're not set up for that. And the a la carte stuff has all kinds of potential agency issues with it too. Hi, I'm your agent to show you the property, but I'm not your agent to write the offer. That's going to be a different agent. And by the way, they're not going to go do the inspection. I mean, it's a very potentially complicated legal duty issue, which is why those companies have for the most part all standalone forms.
Yeah, and one of the things that I would do if I had a listing in private agent remarks, I would put offer must be submitted on CAR forms only. Other outside forms will not be considered, period. And put it in there because we've seen it, and when we see those forms come across, we now have to tell our seller, hey, this is, here's an offer on your property. It's not a CAR form. We can't sit there and interpret that agreement. Now we have to tell our seller, you need to go get an attorney to read that.
Actually, you have to give them a non-standard form disclosure.
Yeah.
Before anything custom. And if you're the listing agent, you have control over what the format of the offer is going to take. If you're the buyer's agent and you get into one of these outfits that are slowly pushing out their own forms, now you're in a little bit more defensive position because you can't dictate that a CAR form will be used. All you can do is try and use it, and then they come back and they say, no, we want you to use our custom forms. And now you have a problem because now you guys get a pass on talking about the CAR forms. You guys get to basically, when you're talking about those forms, you're essentially giving legal advice to some degree, and that's okay because you've been trained on those forms. These custom forms, you're not trained on. And I've seen a few of them already, and I'm not impressed, candidly, because these are the larger nationwide firms. What they're doing is they're generating a one-size-fits-all document, and then they're having addendums to them. So, for example, they get their one-size purchase contract, and they'll have a California addendum with the California stuff in it. I got to be honest with you, and I've seen them from the big kids that are doing it. Not impressed. So yeah, you would end up best practice if whenever you get one of these documents, you have to remember, if you're going to transmit it to your client, whether it's a buyer or a seller, you have to give them the non-standard forms disclosure first, because that's the disclosure that says, hi, this is not a CAR form. I, as your agent, can't give you any advice on it. And the form itself recommends that you go talk to a lawyer. And that's where, depending on which side of the transaction you're on, you may have some control over dictating that it's going to be a CAR form or not.
Where we see that typically here is investors buying that have a blanket agreement that they like to use. And I would just, again, if I'm the listing agent, I would suggest you put in there, seller will only consider an offer on CAR forms, period. And just put that in there.
A friend of mine is with Coldwell Banker, and she said that they have their own forms now, and other companies, are using their own forms. Is this what you're speaking of? These kinds of forms, Andrew?
Yep.
Yes, all of them.
Can I
Wow.
say that? Without the buyer broker agreement, can I say the seller will only consider an offer on CAR forms?
Yes.
Without
yes, on your
buyer
listing
broker?
agreement, you must write, seller will only entertain offers written on CAR forms. So if somebody asks you, do you have that in writing from your seller? Yes, I do. Period.
Okay.
Now
Okay.
you're covered. You can honestly say, yep, I do. It's right on my listing agreement. Can you send that to me? No, it's my listing agreement.
Okay.
But it
So
is on there, and that's what my seller has instructed and wants. So period.
So if you get an offer from a Coldwell Banker agent and it's on their form, then it won't be accepted? Like, we wouldn't be able to do it?
I wouldn't, because unless
Wow.
now your seller, they'll have to hire an attorney. Because
Yeah,
you-
Yeah,
wow.
so just to be clear though, if you get an offer, notwithstanding what Linda just said, if somebody sends you an offer that's on one of these custom forms, notwithstanding whatever your seller told you, you're still going to present it to the seller. You're going to present it to them with the non-standard forms disclosure, and then you're going to reiterate, hey, remember when we took the listing, we talked about you not accepting this because we can counter it out, just counter it with CAR form. I mean, if you really wanted to, you just counter it with the form. But the point is, you want to make sure your seller understands that all of a sudden it's going to cost them more money to sell this property because you're not an attorney. You don't have the ability to tell them how to fill the form out, really, put their name in there. The reality is you're going to hand them the form and say, if you want to use this form, you got to fill it out. You have to tell me what you want put in here. And I really can't answer any questions about how this form works. And by the way, I've seen at least one form. It was not one of the big firms, but I've actually seen one that was actually passive removal of contingencies. We haven't had that in 15 years. So I mean, there's some weird stuff out there, and you guys can't. And so your seller, did they want to go hire a lawyer?
So you
Okay,
would
if I
count,
was your,
so would you counter saying resubmit the offer on a car form? That would
well,
be if
I think you can. In fact, that's the easiest thing to do because otherwise, why would you want to get a CR form and then you go fill it out? You could. That's what I was mentioning. You could. I actually saw an agent that did that. They spent more time doing it because now they're filling out the offer based on what they saw, and they basically made it the counter offer the way they wanted it. They cleaned it all up and they did it, but it took them more time. But you have if you're the listing agent, you have control over that. How you want to present it, it just depends on the way you're dealing with your seller. But my point is ethically, you always want to present all offers to your sellers, just
Okay.
period, just always, and the only time you would not do that is if your seller in writing says, do not even show me an offer if it's X, Y, or Z. And even then I'd still show them the offer.
Okay, thank you.
Did I miss something, Andy, or did someone say why Coldwell Banker has a different not using the car forms?
Oh, there's some of they've made business decisions that they want to do their own forms. There's all kinds of things that they're doing. They're trying to capture the business, whatever. Some of them just don't like CAR or NAR, candidly. But to generate those forms, they got to have a lot of attorney staff power to generate forms. And they're not generating every form. They're only generating certain forms. So they're still kind of using forms. I know one of them has told their agents, you don't have to use our forms, but you can. Okay. And they've got their own residential listing agreement. For example, they did their own listing agreement. They did their own RPA. But the listing agreement part of it, they've got their own listing agreement for them. Okay. They're still using the CAR forms elsewhere. So whether that's going to be a big problem or not, I don't know, because custom forms have been out there. Don't see them very much because most agents aren't going to use them. And now the firms, even like Coldwell Banker, do they have attorney staff? Sure. Do they have the ability to educate their agents on the use of their forms? Sure. Okay. That doesn't change the fact that any agent that receives that offer doesn't know anything about it if they're not with Coldwell Banker, for example.
Thank you.
On the air forms, it's the same thing. It's a form outside car. We're not trained on it. We're not familiar with it. And if you receive an offer on those forms, you need to suggest that your seller get an attorney to review the documents. Again, put in your
writing.
agent remarks. Must be submitted on car forms, period.
I don't understand why they're even doing this, as if to add more change and more complications to everything. Like, what's the point of making their own form? I don't get it.
Well,
Do you have an answer?
I'm not on their staff. All I can do is tell you the practical side of it is they don't care about the rest of the industry. They only care about their business model, and their business model has them doing this. They don't care how the impact on you. They can care less. If you're not one of their agents, they can care less. So, that's the bottom line. That's their business model. And, some of the bigger companies are doing that in unison for all kinds of reasons, including they don't like CAR or NAR. But yeah, that's just what they're doing. But again, the non-standard forms have not been a big issue thus far, and they've been out there for years. Will we see more of it? We'll see. We'll see how this plays out over the next year.
Okay. Any other questions? So just kind of a show of hands. How many of you would like another buyer rep agreement class on the form? And the RLA, the listing agreement? Just a practical go through, go through the form workshop. If you could just put in chat real quick, yes or no, don't need it. So I can get a feel for training. Okay, lots of yeses. Okay, I'll get it inked. So we'll
Can I
put,
ask something before we leave? I put it in the chat. I joined late, so I'm sorry if this was already asked, but the buyer agent compensation, is it negotiable during the inspection period? Like you agree to something, up front in the offer, and then the request for repairs comes back and it's whatever number or whatever, like repairs. Can we say, yes, I'll do this repairs, but we've got to lower the buyer agent compensation or, something like that?
yes, you can do that, but then you have to do the modification of the buyer rep agreement. There's a form for that. So you would have to change that because escrow is going to have your buyer rep agreement as well as your SPBB. And so if you change that during the course of the escrow, maybe a credit because of the request for repairs, now you have to change your buyer rep agreement and send that to escrow.
So as the
I
listing.
guess my question would be, from an agent standpoint, why would you negotiate your commission having to do anything with repairs to the property? You can certainly make a business decision to do that, to give the client a discount or something like that, and that's okay. But you've got an agreement for a commission. So to the extent that you're willing to lower your commission, whether you're on the listing side or the buyer side, that's a business decision for you, and you can do that at any time. But as Linda said, you gotta revise your agreement, either the BRBC or the RLA. And then more importantly, you got to make sure escrow knows about it, because as Linda said, they're going to have other numbers. You got to let them know what you're getting paid. And if you're going to do that at the beginning of the transaction. And then if that changes, you have to remember to make sure you let escrow know, because I've already had a couple of instances where escrow cut a different check, not necessarily for the reason you're talking about, but there was a change in the compensation in the course of escrow, and they didn't tell escrow about it. And by the way, that can delay the close of escrow. They find out at the 11th hour. Guess what? That changes the closing form. That may change the loan docs, and now you got a delayed escrow because you didn't let escrow know. So just be careful if you do it.
So as the listing agent, let's say I'm taking an offer, I'm agreeing to pay the buyer agent, 2 or 2.5, whatever it is. And then we go through inspections and they submit this request for repairs that's like, whatever, $10,000 or something crazy. And I say, as the listing agent, can I negotiate that buyer agent commission in the RR or no? It has to I have to say, okay, buyer agent, you need to revise your BRBC and send that to me. And then I'll give.
No, you don't. If somebody told you to revise your listing agreement, because they want to interfere with your contract with your seller, that's not the proper place to do that. You just say, no, we don't accept this, or you give them a number, and it has nothing to do with compensation. What the other agent's getting compensated doesn't matter to you. They've got their own agreement with their buyer, and you shouldn't get involved in that. Just like I would say they shouldn't get involved in yours.
Yeah, I would never, as a listing agent on an RR, request that the buyer's agent reduce their commission. Never.
Yeah, that's up to them. If they want to reduce their commission for
If-
their buyer so that the buyer can get the deal and all of that, that's between them. All you care about on the listing side is my seller is not willing to pay what you've asked for in your RR. Here's our reply that says, you know, yes, no, or here's a number, and go from there.
Okay.
All
I
right.
have one more question, just circling back to the BRBC. If your buyer agrees to pay you, let's say 3% commission, they don't really want to, but they agree, you know, hoping that, knowing that sellers are generally paying. When you present the offer, if a seller's agent request, do we need to send them that BRBC? Because if it shows that the buyer signed it for, let's say 3% or 2.5% or whatever, then the seller will figure, okay, I don't have to pay anything. They're going to pay you. They've already signed.
You are
You know,
going
it's
to
almost like
send, you are going to send
What's
page 5 of the buyer rep agreement with your offer and your SPBB, which has your confirmation of compensation. So you don't have to send the entire buyer rep agreement. You will just send page 5. Paragraph 16 is confirmation of compensation, and that's what you send over. And that should then match the SPBB. If it doesn't, then if the SPBB is different from your buyer rep agreement, then you would have to do a modification of your rep agreement to be consistent. Remember,
But you're kind of showing the seller like, okay, well, my buyer is willing to pay me 2.5%, you know, and then the seller's like, okay, fine, let's pay. You know, it's like showing your poker hand.
Well, they don't know that if the box is checked where the buyer doesn't have the funds to pay either, because you don't have the whole agreement. So yes, I understand what you're saying. You're gonna put that amount in there, and then, you know, I've seen on plenty of counters now where it's negotiated and it put in their buyer's agent to be paid 2.5%, or maybe the buyer's agent put in for 3%, and the seller said, well, I'll pay 2.5%, or I'll pay 2%. So that's what we're seeing, but those are the forms and how you handle it. But don't send the whole buyer rep agreement over.
So Linda, how do you send just one page?
Huh?
You said just send page 5. How do you send just page 5?
Just take a copy of it and send it.
So like I usually send it from not DocuSign, but from the MLS, you know, where it automatically emails it over.
Well,
From
you're
the
gonna have to
MLS?
take a special, you know, you're gonna have to go in, make a copy of it and send it over with your offer.
But how do you mind if I just ask you really quick, how do you make a copy of
Let's
just
do this off here. I don't want to sit and, you know, take everyone's time on that. You just have to make a copy of it and make it you make it a document or whatever it is you're going to do. I don't know if while you're in document.
Can I make a suggestion regarding that?
Sure.
Print page 5 but not just to print it out on the printer, but to do a PDF, save it to a PDF, and there you got your page 5, and then you can send that as a separate.
Okay, thank you, Ernie. That's a great idea.
Okay.
So, yeah, so remember.
I'm sorry, I just wrote that in the comments about how to save one page. It's so easy.
Pardon? So
I said I just put it in the comments, how to save the one page.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
So remember, when you do the offer, the RPA, you're going to check box 3G3, stating that you are going to be submitting the SPBB that's incorporated now into your agreement. It also states that if you are doing the SPBB, that you must have a signed BRBC. So those are the documents that go with your offer. So in a perfect world, the listing agent should receive the RPA, 3G3 should be checked. You will receive the page 5 of the BRBC, Some agents are sending the entire thing, whatever, they don't need to. And the SPBB. So those are the forms you should be receiving when you get an offer. Or instead of, if you could also, or receive the property showing representation agreement. So if you haven't looked at those forms, remember, the buyer rep agreement is good for 90 days. That's it. The property showing agreement is for 3 properties at a time, and it is only good for 30 days, and it's not exclusive. Not exclusive. So there is a difference. So we'll
Well, it looks like everybody's questions have been answered, Linda.
I hope so, but you know what? We keep having them, and that's fine. I mean, look, I have questions. I've called Andy and said, okay, I need someone to help me clear this. So it is confusing. It's a lot to take in. I am very pleasantly surprised. It's not as traumatic as I was afraid August 14th was going to be when CRMLS, dropped the hammer. So you guys have done a really good job. I'm proud of all of you. So, but it does take time. You have to put time in to understand it, because it is a lot and there's a lot riding on it. I think right now, I want y'all to be extra cautious at open houses and really practice this. If you haven't emailed me for the open house information Q&A, email me. I've already, in this class, probably sent out 15 already, so let me know. Okay. All right, you guys have a great day, and I'll get that class scheduled. It will be live. It's not going to be Zoom. We're going to do that in here. So anyway, everyone have a great day.
Take care. Bye-bye.